It is also my honor to announce the motion for this final. The motion for this final is: this House would not allow religious communities to expel members on the basis of views or actions that contradict doctrinal teachings. Ladies and gentlemen, the debate.
On this stated motion, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to begin this debate.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to say that at the final of Berlin Worlds, it's the case from government that religious communities should embrace dissent. We're going to seek to prove to you two things in the government today. Firstly, that for a religious community to expel someone who simply disagrees with them or acts slightly outside what they believe at that time in their religious history is outside the scope of what a religion has a right to do or what a religion can punish a person for. Secondly, we're going to show you that there are actually going to be more benefits than harms to religious communities in this debate. What are we talking about? We're talking about situations such as when a young woman in a religious community has an abortion, when a young man comes out as gay, when people express particularly tolerant viewpoints or dispute particular aspects of that religion, that religious community cannot simply expel them or reject them. Families are not allowed to throw them out on the basis of what has occurred here. We think that this will broadly apply to what are quite conservative religious communities, because they're the ones that typically conduct these actions today. So, the first point then that we bring to you, we think that this is far beyond what a religion has a right to do in terms of punishment for an individual. So the first point is that the role religion plays in society is of the kind of nature that it means that religions are fundamentally in the public sphere.
Sir.
Why do we think this? We think that religious communities or religious institutions are fundamentally the centre of social interaction within people. We think that that's often simply true when people go to church, they interact in that circumstance. It's true that when the Islamic bells ring and people go to prayer, they will often interact afterwards. We think that that means that communities form around these religions. Secondly, we say that religion is generally the centre of national culture in many of these places in these communities. That means that it plays a role at a particular level in society which is public. Finally, we think that it typically likes to extend itself into public discourse and have an influence on society. We think that that means that it takes on a particular role and identifies itself as public. Finally, we think, and this flows into the second point that I'm going to make, religion has a particular power over people that makes it on a public level, and I'll take you right now, yes.
So how do you anticipate these people will be treated if they remain within these religious communities?
Well, as we're going to tell you, we think that adjustment and reconciliation is a normal part of human existence. And we think that even though these people obviously initially reject and dislike the people that act outside what they believe is true, typically they will realise that those people are like them fundamentally, still agree with their religious views in a broad level, and will actually come to adjust and accept those people within their communities. That has happened in religious communities throughout history. That happens with us when we meet people that disagree. It's normal, and we think that that will continue to happen. But going back to the point I was making just before, we think that for a religion to do this to an individual is the most destructive action that this public community can have. Why do we think that? Firstly, we say that it necessarily condemns this person to hell. It's the strongest form of rejection that a living religion can actually do to a person. It says that you are so outside the scope of what we can do that there is no way you can fit within our religious views. You're going to hell, goodbye. Secondly, we say this is particularly important because this person has no choice. They did not opt into this religion in this instance. They didn't opt into the religion because they were born into it within their community. They were raised to have those values from the very first day. Often they were baptised as a child. That means they do not have that decision-making power, and it means they've been imbued with those from an early age. They usually probably at an early age when they start to express these views and start to feel that there might be things about them that are distinct from this religion as well. Secondly, we say that this person probably didn't choose the circumstances that led them to disagree with that religion. We say, obviously being gay is not a choice. If you're gay and the religion doesn't accept you, we think that that means that you don't choose to do that or be in the religion at all. So we say that this is unfair action for a religious community to take to a person, particularly given that we don't think that religion, we do think that religion can be malleable. Which leads me nicely to my second point, because we think that this can be particularly valuable to religions themselves. They can be a positive catalyst for change within these religious communities themselves. There's problems with religion today. The nature of religion is such that it's bound by scripture, it's bound by history, and the fact that it tends to be stagnant in terms of how it moves. Often the people that have control in religions are particularly conservative members of them as well, because they're the ones that adhere to the values that the broad majority agree with, and we think that that means they're likely to be more conservative. Yes?
Would you oblige someone to hang out with a person who their wife had cheated upon them with?
Well, no, but we think there are a different set of rules and societal things that exist to deal with that sort of situation. Of course, you're allowed to divorce a person and leave them alone on that basis. But obviously, generally the community still will generally accept that person. We don't think that that's particularly applicable to this debate. Okay. So what does that mean, that religions exist in a particular conservative way? It means that they struggle to adapt to the pace of change in society. It means that when society liberalises, as it typically does, they don't adjust with that. They also don't adjust to the inevitable change that occurs when new technologies are invented, when there's greater connectivity with the rest of the world that reveals particular different values. They struggle to accept and adjust with that. We say that this has been particularly bad recently as the pace of change has started to advance, particularly in terms of interconnectedness in the world. This is bad, firstly, for the communities themselves, because it separates them from those societies. It means that they choose not to interact more often than not with other people, and we think that that's bad for them. But secondly, it actually fundamentally undermines the overall purpose of religions. Typically, religions want to do good in the world, whether that's spreading their own doctrines or doing what it is that charitable Christians do, for example, and provide welfare and provide things for people in exchange for being able to spread that religion. We think that if they can't adjust to society, they are likely to not be able to do the good in the world that they want to. So why is it in this instance that we think that these people will be a good mechanism for change? The first thing to be said here is that people that are different to religion are going to feel more comfortable and more likely to express themselves and their views within these communities. So if you're gay, you're far more likely to come out to your religious community if they know that they can't reject you. You're more likely to express particular viewpoints that you have. We say that that's true for those extreme cases, but it also means that you don't get the chilling effect. You don't get the fear of people expressing slightly controversial views or slightly different views to the rest of the community. So that means that you get that broad acceptance there as well. We think that therefore, and I made this point when I responded to a point of information, you get the sort of forced interaction that leads to tolerances. Because always people are disagreeing, but religions typically are bad at tolerating that disagreement. Typically, religions are likely to immediately reject people on the basis that it violates something that they've always believed their entire lives, and that will be a very short-term action with short-term thinking. We say that often if they are forced to interact with them and forced to live with those viewpoints, they realise that that person actually does live broadly with the values they accept, is still very much like them, and therefore they tend to reconcile themselves and their beliefs with that person and with their views as well. For all of these reasons, we're very proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister and now welcome the Leader of Opposition.
Madam Chair, you might view it as odious that a religious community doesn't want a gay person in their congregation. But your distaste for that does not mean that you have a right to force that religious community to accept them. Furthermore, at opening opposition, we are going to argue that forcing that community to accept that individual has harms both for that person and for the progress of that group. So 3 issues in this speech with rebuttal and substantive integrated. Firstly, freedom of association and the right of communities to define their members. Secondly, harms to the vulnerable individuals. And thirdly, that this is a very bad way to change religions. So firstly, to freedom of of association. And we heard from the Prime Minister that somehow the private institutions of religion cross some threshold into the public sphere that means that they are public property. We say this was absolutely ridiculous. The fact that lots of people in a community go to a church does not mean that that church is an institution of that entire community. It is not an institution of the entire community. Because not everyone is allowed to be a member of the church to begin with. If you turn up on your first day of church and profess that you have no faith in God, then that church can legitimately reject you. So what does it matter if you turn up, if you believe on your first day and then come back a week later and disbelieve? That community still has the right to expel you. Then he told us, but they insert themselves into discourse and into the public sphere. We think that these sorts of religions that you talk about, that heavily prize their ability to exclude members, are the ones that don't particularly intervene in the state and are happy to accept a quid pro quo where they don't try and influence national politics in return for the state not messing with them. What do we say in the alternative about this freedom of association? We say that religious groups are no different to any other group, that they can exclude people on any criteria they want, even subjective, even if that's based on a belief in God and a particular act such as homosexuality is a sin. We would give the examples of political parties, where if an individual undermines that message, they would be legitimate in expelling that person. Dom gave you an excellent example in a point of information, that you wouldn't force an adulterer to hang out with that person. Their moral judgments are allowed to decide the company that they keep. Let's turn now to the harm to the religious communities that is inflicted by this model. What you are doing is making people sit in church with people that they know that make a mockery of their beliefs and constantly contradict them. People that question whether God exists, question whether God is all good or all knowing. That is incredibly harmful for all the other people in that congregation. Even if it's something like someone being gay or a priest marrying a gay person or being an adulterer, this also is incredibly harmful to those other religious people's ability to actualise their belief in freedom of religion. Because they will have a belief that what they are doing in allowing that person to continue in their religious institution is complicit in their sin, that they have not succeeded in stopping that person and that they have not expressed the disapproval by expelling them from that group. The harm to the religious people in that instance is enormous. Of things like forcing them to watch gay people be married by rogue priests that now can't be kicked out by the Catholic Church, because they believe that they will be punished into eternity in hell because they are complicit in this sin that you're foisting upon them. Let's turn to the opposite right here, which is the harm to the excluded group. And we heard from Prime Minister that they have no choice to religion. That is absolutely not true. You could be dunked in a baptismal font, but that it doesn't mean very much to the people that then go on to question their religion, and they're welcome to leave it at any time, and they absolutely do have choice of religion. Next, we heard that they have no choice of the characteristic which makes them hated by the religious community. Well, they use the very selective example of homosexuality. In the instance of all other sins, like adultery, you do have control over those things. And this model is going to force a lot of people that are just making choices that make a mockery of those religions carry on in them. Alright, second argument I want to look at is the harm to the individual. And we'd say that these individuals are going to be more harmed in the group than out. Because we're not talking about little tiny disagreements in today's debate. We're talking about rather large disagreements between them and the rest of their congregation. The sorts of things that aren't just going to be alright after a little time, like the Prime Minister said, because being gay might be against the fundamental tenets of that religion. So what we say is that these communities are always going to have a very deep desire to get rid of that person. And that is going to manifest itself, and I'll take you in a second, in making it as unpleasant as possible for that person to be there. Not just saying that homosexuality is a sin, but saying that it's an abomination and bullying them at every possible opportunity to get out. And I'll take closing.
A gay man is never going to become a priest in a church and encourage more liberal attitudes if they're kicked out at the bottom rung. Don't you agree that means that the religion might never actually reflect what the majority of people in that community want it to reflect? Alright,
I'm going to turn to why this is a bad way to change religion in my third argument, but the unfortunate thing is that you don't have a right to expose people to contradictory ideas just because you would prefer that people had your smaller liberal set of values. It's quite legitimate for them to continue to be conservative into eternity. So turning back to the harm to the individual, we'd say that when the church cannot externalise that problem and force that individual out of the church that they think is committing a constant sin, they now have the incentive to make them internalise their hatred, make them hate themselves for being gay, because that's the only way that they can mete out sufficient punishment to that person in order to make them act in conformity with what the church would want. As a result of that, it's going to be much harder for this struggling gay youth to reconcile their religious belief of being Catholic with their sexuality when the church has an incentive to make them hate themselves for it because they can't simply kick them out for it. We think that this model massively harms those individuals. Last argument I want to look at in this debate is about why this is a bad way to change those religions. Because we heard from Prime Minister that the Conservative members control the church. We absolutely think that that doesn't change under this model. We then heard that, that they'll see that the person who is sinning is not very different to them. We think it could also have the opposite effect, that it could confirm their worst stereotypes. If, for example, someone were promiscuous, that could confirm their worst stereotypes of that group that they already hate, and that would be a massive harm in this debate. But furthermore, even if they are like them in every other respect in believing in God, it only takes one unforgiven sin to not enter into heaven anyway, so we don't think that that's something that they're necessarily going to lie together and sing Kumbaya over. What do we tell you about why this is a bad way to change religion? We would say that changing religion is more likely when discourse is dispassionate, when you are not seen as having an affront on that religion and foisting your view upon them. They are more likely to respond to rational arguments about whether or not they should liberalise. Secondly, they are more likely to change if they don't think that this has been prejudged by the state, if they don't feel that they particularly are being victimised because they are religious. So because we think that religions absolutely do have this right and it harms the individuals and any change that you want to achieve, we're very proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the previous speaker and welcome the Deputy Prime Minister.
I can think of few things that would be more difficult than discovering you were homosexual if you had Catholic views that were imbued in you from your youth. However, one of those few things that I can think of is if you know that fact that you are homosexual is going to lead you to be rejected from your community, cut off from all the way of life you know, excommunicated from all your friends, and damned to eternal damnation. On this side of the House, we're very, very proud to stand up and say that the religions which function in the public sphere need to be inclusive, and the community has absolutely no right to inflict that kind of punishment onto any individual person. There are two questions in that debate. Thank you. The first is, why this punishment is well and beyond what we think anyone should be able to do to anyone else. And secondly, how we think the embracing of dissent will improve our world and improve these religious institutions. Okay. But before doing that, I'd just like to clear something up. I actually think it's vaguely disgusting that they're happy to stand up on that side of the House and say that the central tenet of religions is bigotry and a lack of acceptance of others. We're quite proud on this side of the House to say that the central tenet of religion is to do good in the world. And we think that those fundamental founding principles are, as my first speaker told you, improved when those religions are more accepting. We're very proud to say that today. Right. Two questions. Why is punishment beyond what a community should be able to do? It's not enough when Alec talks in his speech about the role religion plays in people's lives, people's communities, and in fact people's states, for the leader of the opposition simply to stand up and go, oh, private institutions, doesn't matter. The fact that religions insert themselves in such a way into our society, the fact that in many parts of the world they are in fact that society, and in that fabric of that society, means that we are quite happy to say that society should be able to regulate what they can do. But moreover, just being a private institution doesn't give you a right to run roughshod over other individuals. It doesn't give you a right to inflict any punishment upon others. And we'd say that even if they are private, that punishment that they inflict on people is well and beyond what we should allow anyone to do in our society. We're proud to say that.
Religion isn't just a personal interaction, right? Much like, look at things like the Church of England, where people will meet up, join a service, and they'll have a chat over tea and biscuits as part of that community. When the Moyassin calls people to prayer, people meet not only to prayer, but to discuss what goes on in that community, to make friends, to interact. Some religions, in fact, are national, right? They are, in fact, part of that state, something you cannot take away, you should not be able to take away from someone. Right. But not only that, not only is it too much for someone's life within, like, the corporal realm to throw them out of religion, we'd stand up and say that it's too much to damage their identity in such a way and throw them out on their spirituality. Because we say that when the values you were raised with from your first day tell you that you need to belong to this particular group or this particular community to get anywhere in your life, you need to belong to this community to get to heaven, and if you don't, you're doomed to hell, that's a punishment above and beyond what people should be able to inflict. Yeah. Point.
So,
no, person.
Why must progressivism be the ultimate objective of a religious institution?
Right. Yeah, sure. On this side of the House, we're quite happy to say that moving against bigotry is a pretty damn good ultimate objective. We're quite happy to say that becoming accepting of others, homosexuality, different ethnicities, different opinions and different viewpoints is a perfectly good objective for things to pursue. And furthermore than that, we'd say, as I told you in my intro, the primary objective of religions is to do good. And we think that doing good requires a degree of that acceptance. But when those values that you were raised with from your first day, and we deny on this side of the House that you have a choice, right? People are not only just baptised and dumped in water, it also actually involves a whole lot of indoctrination into those particular opinions. And of course it's going to be hard when you discover that something about you is unaccepted by that community. But it's so much harder when you are completely cut off from that community and given no opportunity to redeem yourself, no chance of bringing about that kind of change. We never said it was easy, but we say that it's worse under your situation. But furthermore than that, we say it has a delirious effect, even if you don't actually come out, right? So if you're in a situation where you know you're something different, I mean, homosexuality is a very good example here, we say it has a delirious effect on shaping your identity when you know that coming out would lead to such a dramatic effect upon your life, right? So even when these people do remain in these communities, we say they're not going to embrace their full identity, they're not going to get a chance to live the life that they should and would and have a right to live because of the fact that the religion will hold them down. Right. Settle that point. Next point. How is it embracing dissent helps these religious communities, right? So, to the extent that open opposition won't just simply characterise this as, oh, you know, it'd be impossible to hold a church service if people were like, saying, oh, God's not real, you can't do it, right? We'd say, if people are being obnoxious and obstructive in a particular gathering or church service, we think it's absolutely fine to say that person needs to leave at that moment. What is not okay is to take someone who has a different viewpoint from you and ban them from ever rejoining that community. Ban them from sitting there quietly, minding their own business, knowing the fact that they are homosexual, and not allowing them to join into that society. That's the point we made. Please respond to that. Yep. Right. But furthermore, we'd say, no thank you. So religions are often, to the extent that religions are often conservative, and this is because of, like, you know, inbuilt biases in their leadership, the fact they tend to hang on to history, hang on to scripture, we think actually like damages their ability to be effective institutions. So broadly, we are very, very proud to say that accepting institutions are good, and we think the more accepting an institution is, the better that institution is. How is it then that we make religions or institutions more accepting? Okay, so what we say here is that, as I have told you and was unresponded to in his speech, there is a strong chilling effect even on minor dissidents. So even if the opinion you're voicing is not in gross discord to what's going on in that religion, you're discouraged from saying that opinion because of the fact that you know it might lead to your cutting off that entire way of life. But furthermore, we'd say that if people interact with these individuals who hold these different opinions, hold the different sexual preferences, hold the different choices in their life, they're far more likely to get rid of those stereotypes. It's not good enough for them to say, oh, but, you know, what about if they're really promiscuous? And it, like, performs that myth that, you know, promiscuity is associated with bad things, right? We'd say that the reason these people associate negative impacts is because they never meet these people, right? It's the fact their image of, like, what it means to be an adulterer is someone who is, like, you know, a devil himself. And we say that kind of interaction is what you need in order to, like, start breaching those false myths and stereotypes. And we think it's actually a benefit when people have to confront and justify their views in line with difference to others.
We're very, very proud today to say that the central tenet of religion is to make the world a better place. And we think that not only should they not be able to harm people in their lives, but we actually enable them to do it under our model. Very, very proud to propose.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. I now call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Unsurprisingly, Madam Speaker, we don't associate ourselves in this debate as team bigotry. We're the team that says that when you come together to form a community that defines itself by its commitment to a faith, that you have the right to say what elements of that faith are requirements to be a part of it. The only example these guys were willing to engage in this debate was instances where people had no choice, like homosexuality. And I'll get to that category. But they didn't engage with the harder and more difficult circumstances, in instances where people with full information, knowing that they would go to hell in the teachings of that particular religion if they had an abortion, did that instance. Because in the eyes of people within a religion, that was murder. That person committed murder, and in that instance, those people didn't have to associate with who was, in their eyes, a murderer. I'm going to deal with a couple of things in this speech. Firstly, I'm going to look at the clash of rights between freedom of religion and the right to associate freely in this debate. Secondly, I'm going to look at the question of to what extent do we want to engender change within religions, and if we did, is this a good way to go about it? And thirdly, I'm going to look at substantively the ability to access liberal information in isolated religious communities that are likely to engage in practice of expulsion, and why it harms access to information within those communities. But first, on the question of the clash of rights. No, thank you. There's been some back and forth in the opening half about the extent to which religions are public institutions. The most compelling, or the least compelling analysis we've heard from the open government in this debate was that because religions attempted to insert themselves into the public sphere, that made them public institutions. That didn't deal with Paul's response, which was to say that we wouldn't oblige religions to accept anybody, that we allowed them to discriminate at the very first instance, that you made a commitment to be a part and a member of that faith. They said, and were willing to concede, that in instances where you were going to disrupt people's ability to practice their religion by not being a part of that faith and by saying God does not exist, that church had a right to temporarily exclude you. In circumstances where people continue to exist in a perpetual state of sin, we think that church has the right to exclude those people on an ongoing basis. But even if they were public institutions, we've proved that you had the right to exclude people on the basis of A, self-interest, and B, moral judgment. That in circumstances where political parties had someone cross the floor, it was perfectly within that religion's right, that political party's right to exclude that person from that party. They violated the very interest of the organisation of which they were a member. We had no response to that particular material. We also said that was something you could make on the basis of moral judgments, whether you're in a public institution or a private institution. So we wouldn't oblige someone to hang out with someone who cheated upon them with their wife, because that would be, in that person's particular moral code, religious or otherwise, something that they thought was unfair. We thought the freedom of association of all parishioners and practitioners in this debate trumped the rights of that individual to do that. But let's engage with the balance of rights in this debate. No, thank you. They told us that because this individual had no choice initially to be a member of that religion, that meant they had a perpetual right and an ongoing right to be a part of that. We don't think that's true in this debate. That person had no choice initially. That in many circumstances, the very people they were talking about were the people that made decisions about whether they would abide by those codes and were making decisions left, right and centre about whether they wanted to be a part of that religion. The second, they didn't prove that it undermined that person's ability to exercise their religious rights in other ways. You could exercise those rights in personal faith rather than in hierarchical religious institutions. You could go to a Reformed church rather than an Orthodox church, because you don't have the right to sit on the lower forum of the synagogue in an Orthodox Jewish church just because that's what you particularly believe. Opening.
Do you really think that a person who is engaging with their sexuality for the first time in their teenage years has ever realistically had a chance to opt out of the religion they've been raised with from birth?
Absolutely we do. And in those situations, they had those opportunities at school in the kind of friends they met. Maybe they live in an isolated religious community. My substantive will deal with that material a little bit later. But in circumstances where these people have no access to no other information, we don't think you've ever met the burden that information doesn't exist. And particularly we don't think you've responded to false material about why the kind of eternal damnation that person would still face. You weren't changing the eternal damnation in this debate, Madam Speaker, was still something that would create the deterrent that individual can construct their own sexuality. So I was explaining why the opposition opening government never proved that people couldn't exercise their religious rights elsewhere. They also never proved that the right of any individual person, no thank you, to be in that church and to be a sinner trumped the other individuals. Paul told you that when you had a positive obligation in some religions to minimise the amount of sin in the world, that you made individuals complicit in your sin by continuing to preach and practice in their presence. We didn't think that was something that they proved in this debate was legitimate. Second question, well, how best do we engender change with the religions? Is that something we really want to do? The closing government in this debate asked us a point of information which said, well, maybe maybe we're kind of missing the democratic change within religions that says most people within these religions really want to change them to be really liberal and accepting, and that we should allow people to assume posts that would allow them to exercise those changes. A couple of responses here. The first thing Paul said was that the very premise that conservative religions have an obligation to become more progressive was a fundamentally pernicious one. That in circumstances where people chose to define their own communities on the basis of conservative values about family and teaching and God and faith, that was exactly their right. Second thing we'd say is that in many situations that individuals have opted into that hierarchical structure, that in circumstances where they have no positive obligation to be able to accept the structures within that church when they themselves opted into it to begin with, through their continuing presence at church on a weekly basis. We told you 3 further reasons why change wasn't likely to occur. Because when in circumstances where the state was prejudging the abilities of the church to assess and mitigate these circumstances themselves, that in circumstances where change was more likely to occur if it was dispassionate rather than forcible, and circumstances where changes were more likely to occur through the splintering of religions rather than imposing burdens upon the most orthodox elements of those religions. We're quite happy for change to come from reform elements, which these people are likely to end up into if they're particularly desperate to continue to practice their faith. No, thank you. Substantively, why does this limit the access to liberal information in isolated religious communities? Because we think in this debate the opening government has spoken as if it would be the Catholic Church that willy-nilly does this. We think in circumstances the people that hold the threat of expulsion over other members of that church's head are often more isolated and cultish religious communities. We think this proposal harms the access to information that those people would want to be able to liberalise in the future. We think in circumstances where you allow people to exercise a full and meaningful choice about their ongoing participation in a religion, that religion needs to reserve the right to exclude people who take on those liberalising forces. We take the example of Rumspringa within the Amish community, which depends upon the ability of the Amish community to subsequently exclude people if they come back with the ways of the quote-unquote English. That in circumstances where those people took on modernity in a religion that said that we would reject modernism, that religion had the right to exclude those people from their church. Because it would practically and meaningfully affect their ability to practice their own religion, to have those people continue to be a presence in their community. That doesn't mean people can't leave the Amish community in this debate. They can go to the Mennonite community after they return from their Rumspringa if that's something they so choose. But they can't forcibly impose their ability to live in modern ways on people whose very religion questions the premise of those modern ways. There are a couple of harms of removing the right of those religions to exclude those individuals. The first is it means that those faiths are likely to exclude people from accessing that information in the first place, i.e. those practices are less likely to occur. Second, they're less likely to take on information that, while contradicts some religious practice, doesn't oblige them to leave them. And third, it harms the ability of the state to get their mechanisms into those communities if they do want to exercise basic and liberal changes. For all of those reasons, we were very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition. I'd now like to invite the Member of Government.
Madam Speaker, at closing government, we are going to give you 2 distinct conceptual reasons why religious communities have a duty not to expel their members. Secondly, I'm going to engage in rebuttal from the front half of this debate. So firstly, on a duty. We're not arguing in this debate that religions always have a duty to be progressive or to make the kinds of changes that the people we want not to be expelled want made. What we're arguing is that religion can't throw them out. Religion has to listen to their views. Whether the religion then changes is up to that religion. Okay, so on the 2 distinct reasons for the duty. The first is that religion actively creates an environment in which its members depend for their spiritual survival on being a part of that group. Religion thrives by saying, if you do not stay with us, if you do not perform particular practices, so in the case of the Catholic Church, performing communion, believing the transubstantiation of Christ, not committing a very specific list of sins, you will go to an eternal hell. And they describe that hell very graphically. Secondly, we say that religious communities, and these guys wanted to talk about minority religious communities, often cut you out from the outside world and make it very, very difficult for you to form any links from the outside world. So, to the extent that and they will often do things like not educate you, so you don't have basic financial skills, you can't go out and get a job, you don't know anyone outside the community who will be able to support you, you don't share any beliefs with anyone else in society. So to the extent that a religion then expels that member, we say they are directly implicated in causing the emotional harm of that expulsion. Why? Because they created an environment in which that individual felt compelled to stay within that group, felt that their spiritual survival depended on their acceptance by that community. That is why people stay in religions, that is why people give hundreds of billions of dollars every year to religions. But the second reason is a bit more concrete for those of you who like that, which is that society grants religions freedom of religion, and we think the quid pro quo is that religions themselves should offer people freedom of religion. This point has two prongs. The first way is I'm going to explain to you how all of you in this audience do a hell of a lot to allow religious institutions freedom of religion. So in many countries like the United States, my own New Zealand, Australia, there is no tax on charitable donations to religions. That means that all of you are foregoing tax for a whole lot of citizens so they can spend that money on creating a religion. There are anti-discrimination laws. Many employers might find it inconvenient to employ someone from a religion that has to take regular breaks to pray, for example, or needs particular religious holidays. But the state says that you have to hire them anyway. Thirdly, we say that often the state makes exemptions for particular requirements, like you as an individual must go to a public school and learn to a particular curriculum. They allow Amish schools to educate their individuals by themselves, even though statistics show that those children are always worse off, Madam Speaker, and will demand a lot more state welfare from you, the citizens, because they're not as well educated. Also, the state allows religions to teach lies to children, to teach that creationism is true, to allow, Madam Speaker, that freedom of religion. And we say, lastly, they allow freedom of expression. They allow me, if I'm a Catholic member, to go out in front of an abortion clinic and tell every woman that goes into that clinic that she is going to hell because she is killing a person. They allow me to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in some countries, less in other countries, donating money to political parties and to lobby groups to try and persuade all of you that their policies is correct. In return, religions have a duty to provide that reciprocal right of freedom of religion to their members. And here is why we say that citizens cannot get that freedom of religion if they are kicked out of that church. Don told you they can just go to a Reformed church. The problem is, Madam Speaker, there may be some parts of Catholicism I truly believe in, like transubstantiation, that the bread that I eat changes into the body of Christ, but I might also be homosexual. The problem is, if I go to a different Christian church, they do not believe in the key tenets of Catholicism. Secondly, we say religion is about having a critical mass of people, affirming my belief, affirming that it is true that I will go to heaven, affirming that I am practicing all of the religious tenets with them in a spiritual community. Thirdly, we say that churches provide institutional infrastructure to do the things that you believe that religion demands of you, like a priest hearing, confessions like burial, and a church courtyard opening.
Would you force churches to admit outsiders who don't believe in God or think adultery is good, just because it might expose this church to a different opinion?
It's not necessarily because it will expose the church to a different opinion, Paul. It's because the church has a duty to uphold the freedom of expression that all of you in this audience have also granted that church. But furthermore, we don't think that you're going to see people coming into churches saying, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in any of your doctrines, because those people don't want to be in the church in the first place, right, guys? We're talking about people who just don't respect of one doctrine, or who are homosexual, or who had an abortion once because they made a bad decision when they were 16 years old and their own church didn't teach them about contraception. But secondly, you guys assume that every tenet a religion holds is central to that religion. You guys ignore the fact that like 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or even 50 years ago in the case of using contraception, that was a huge sin. But how many families of 20 do you see going to a Catholic church on a Sunday morning? Not many, because the Catholic Church has changed, because its members have changed. And the way we bring change, Madam Speaker, is that we say it is no longer okay for the elites who interpret religious texts to say that everything in this religion is a central tenet. What we do is we allow lay members of a church to be exposed to the woman who's had an abortion, to talk to the gay man about how difficult it was, and you're so much more likely to sympathise with that person because they already have religious bonds with them. They don't see that person as a threat because there are many beliefs that they share in common, even if there are one or two beliefs that they disagree on. So they don't see the church as being under attack. Secondly, we say that it's not necessarily true that everyone in your religious community disagrees with all of the religious tenets that we wanted to be accommodated by accommodating these people, right? Because you guys ignore that it's the elites who get to say what the religion is about. And that's because of the way the church is structured. The church teaches that you have to obey priests because priests are quite literally your window into God, that there is no other way that you can practice. Secondly, religions train up particular people, like ultra-Orthodox Jews say these are the only people who have been to the special schools that can interpret the religion. That means that necessarily religions might not reflect the will of the majority within a religion. For all of those reasons, we very proudly propose.
Thank you, Member of Government, and we now call upon the Member of Opposition.
The extension of the closing opposition will be that purity of doctrine is absolutely necessary for any religious community, more than just a religion, a community that prioritises its integrity and its worth on that religion, that its doctrine is essential for the benefit to manifest to its individuals. That would be our extension. Before that, what is the duty of a religion to anybody, to the state, to anyone that would like to be a part of it? That was the extension of closing government. Religion provides an environment of salvation, or one of damnation, the first line. It can cut you off from outside factors. You're not entitled to salvation off the bat. You're not entitled to just say that because you want to label yourself something, you get the benefits of that thing without conforming to it. And secondly, let's take a step back. The conception of damnation and of hell is something that has been retreating from all forms of religion for the majority of the world. Let's have a realistic conception of what most religions and religious communities are like. We think it's legitimate for a community to decide if you would like to be a part of us. You will cut yourself off from outside education. You will ascribe to the values that we say, because we are giving you eternal life. We are giving you the validity of spirituality. That's a benefit that you have. But then we were told that the state accords benefits to freedom of religion, anti-discrimination law, use of tax, differentiated school standards, and that you should be able to opt into different bits. You should decide, like the platter of religion. You would like the salami of transubstantiation. You would like the cheese of divine mandate. And let's sound like that. Tax is distributed, thanks guys. Tax is distributed across all religions. Tax is distributed across any kind of institution that aims to maximise an individual's spiritual growth. In that way, all citizens benefit from the ability of the state to create a functioning way that they can actualise spiritual benefits. But let's really look at that. It's very minor for an atheist or any member of any one religion to lose out on that tax revenue, or to see somebody else's children go to a different school, or to see anti-discrimination law. But the ability for you to construct your identity is so much more than that. The ability for you to say, I belong to this community. We are the true saviours of the earth. We're like, the elect, as Calvinists want to call themselves. We are people who have a unique connection with the divine. That's a huge benefit. That's more than money to an atheist. That's more than seeing someone else's children go to school in a different way to your own kids. Who cares if creationism is a lie? You can't prove that. I can't prove that. Let people have the ability to access their own happiness. You do not have the right to opt. The construction of religion as like the divine buffet that I just illustrated is one that is not true of religious communities, because the extent to which they have a conception of doctrine and of purity is much more than just, say, being a Catholic or being an Anglican. It is about ascribing to a unique set of values. Because the analysis that we had is you didn't opt in. You didn't choose your actions. In the context of the most difficult characterization, where you are a gay man who is struggling to come to, or a gay woman for that matter, who is struggling to come to terms with the identity of Catholicism, in that context where you experience pain, where you experience like real conflict of values, that's when you make the most valid assessment of what things mean to you. It's when you make the most valid and like understood assessment of whether you want to opt into that religion or not. We think you do have the ability to assess what things are to you, even when they cause you pain. We think the fact that this represents a unique assault on people in this community, right? It represents a unique attack on what constitutes their identity, that they have to suffer the presence of heretics and of people that uniquely compromise their ability to live a life with the divine. Yes?
Given that your opening said that most religious people feel they have a positive duty to reduce the amount of sin in the world, don't you think it's a good idea that religions develop a better understanding of how to engage with a more tolerant and more connected society that now exists?
But like, that's about changing what their conception of sin is, right? Like, what is the point of them spreading their doctrine if their doctrines become compromised? What is the point of them saying we go out to do good if their notion of good has been fundamentally attacked, right? Like, that's... Yeah. Anyway, so why is the purity of doctrine essential? Because it is a shared commonality that mobilizes people. It's a shared experience that makes people feel like they are validated, that makes people feel like they're part of something bigger than the other. What does the presence of a non-believer or a heretic do? And this is what is new from our opening here. We say you don't just dislike people that profess that view. You also suspect other people. You also suspect people that are around you that do not opt in to the fullness and richness of your spiritual experience. Secondly, we think that the divine must be absolute. The divine must be something that is not crowdsourced, right? It has to be a thing that is above and beyond this kind of thing that a person can uniquely and directly question. We think spiritual leaders have the ability to lead their flock in a different way, to engage in the kind of progressivism that they wanted. We think that individuals don't have the ability to value and validate another's conception of what religion means to them. So to the extent you are betraying someone else's doctrine, it is probably true that you are better off outside that doctrinal system. We think that if it is true that there is ostracism, and if it is true that these people do not like the threat of heretics, it means that you make that stigma and that pain felt much more early. So you stifle the dissenting voice at the earliest possible opportunity. And let's get on to this, because what we would like to bring you as well is that you need control to allow communities to feel secure in their questioning and allow them to feel secure in their liberalisation. Because we're quite happy to stand for religions to be absolutes. But should they feel like they liberalise, or should they feel like they would wish to question their doctrine, wish to question their nuance, we think it's important that they know that should the conversation turn down an alley that is anathema to them, they can stop that they feel that they can have control over the narrative of their doctrine. When they say, you can do this, but you cannot do that, let's explore the intricacies of what is permissible under our faith. That is when you get the best kind of discussion, when people feel like they're in control, and when people feel like they don't have to be at the behest of the state, because you have stability in exclusion. Fifthly, it allows for a clearer construction of people's identities within that community. Why? Because the community delineates. Because when the community has the ability to exclude, we think they probably have the incentive to say, these are the kind of things that will get you kicked out. These are the kind of things that we believe are absolutely important. And let's understand that there can be very blurred boundaries under the status quo in which they don't have the ability to do that. So it's like, what elements of the hadith in Islam are considered binding? What elements of progressivism within Judaism are considered legitimate and what are not? So we think once you have that delineation, once you have that saying, we have the ability to erect rules structures. These are the rules and tenets of our faith. That gives individuals a much better ability to decide on the divine smorgasbord again, where that religion actually means to them. Whether that is a faith that has been clarified, and in that clarification is something that is attractive to them. We think that leads to a much better construction of your identity. When you're more able to see what faith means to you, when you're more able to see what faith means to itself, and whether that actually represents your conception of what the divine should be. We think in light of that, it's absolutely essential that religions have the ability to purify their doctrine in a communal sense. They retain control, because it leads very much to the benefits they kind of wanted. Because the control in questioning, the ability to feel like they can have dissent, but moderated dissent. One in which they maintain the control of the process, the control of the divine. That's what we want to bring you in opposition.
I thank the previous speaker and welcome the last speaker on the government bench.
Madam Speaker, we think that when the state creates a situation in which religions are empowered to control the doors to heaven or tell us what the doors to hell might be, that they have a corresponding duty, they have a corresponding requirement to allow everybody to get access to the kind of religious fulfilment that those things entail. I'm going to go through this debate and have a look at why we think we have a duty for these churches not to expel on the basis of harm and on the basis of access to freedom of religion, and talk about some of the materials that we've heard. And then I'm going to go through and look at the second question about why we don't think there's a massive harm on religion or a massive attack on religion. Let's go right back to this first point. A lot of material that Steph gave you was relatively undiscussed in this first section. The first point that we told you was essentially that the state needs to create, that when religions essentially actively create an environment in which it's necessary for an individual to be able to practice that religion, and that when they create fear in that individual for leaving that particular religion, that they are themselves absolutely responsible for the harms that exist when they leave that particular religion. We think that they should never be able to incur that type of harm on an individual. We think that's never justified. In response to that, we heard a point which Beavis told us that apparently individuals are entitled to salvation. No, it's not that they're entitled to salvation, ladies and gentlemen. But we think that when the church does create an environment in which someone is scared to leave, that they are culpable for those harms. When they themselves, subjectively, whether they're objectively, if that's possible, salvation or not, the fact that that individual feels that fear and feels that harm is something that organisation should absolutely have a duty not to impose on those people, particularly when they've spent a large amount of time creating that environment and benefiting from that environment. The second thing we told you is that the state provides freedom of religion through a large number of institutions. We told you about foregone taxes and anti-discrimination. And in response to this, essentially we heard that no, look, not all citizens benefit from religion. Not all citizens benefit from religion. And that's true. We think that, not everybody is spiritual, or people are only spiritual to different degrees. But we think that for those people who are religious, the state has given them a huge benefit. And we think that as a result, they have a corresponding duty. Oh, no, thank you. We think that anti-discrimination is in fact a huge burden on the state. The tax take that the Catholic Church takes, or the Anglican Church takes, or the Baptist Church, if you're an American, takes, is a significant amount of money that doesn't go to you or me or all the other atheists in the room, but in fact goes to those religious institutions themselves. I'll take closing.
The environment of fear you talked about still exists for these people, regardless of whether they're in or out. How do you change that?
I'm going to come to that later on, but we think it should be up to the individual to choose whether they want to live inside that environment of fear or not. It shouldn't be up to the church to compel them to a lifetime of hatred inside that community. We think that's fundamentally wrong. What we told you is I said that effectively no other institution gets as much as these churches do. No other kind of political organisation or community organisation does in terms of freedom of religion. We think that it might be really important for me, for example, to start a business or to fulfil my life in some other way. But I don't think the state's going to give me very much money in order to do that. But if they did, ladies and gentlemen, I would absolutely have a duty to pay back for that benefit that I had been given by the state, for the huge benefit that I have received as a result of that, and we don't think that the state does satisfactorily fulfil those things. We think that religions have a duty to provide for the freedom of religion that they've been given the sole benefit of providing by the state. And the second response we heard to this was essentially, well, some people can go to a reformed church. But we say that reformed churches aren't actually nearly as legitimate in many cases for many orthodox followers of religion, for many different reasons. Steph told you a bunch of them that were unresponded to. For example, you need a community of other like-minded followers in order just to be able to practice your religion or exchange those religious values. No, thank you. We think that there are some particular institutions of church or some religious practices that have been self-defined by those churches that nobody else can get access to. The very fact that priests in the Roman Catholic Church are seen to be directly linked to the Holy See is something that only they can provide, and no other Reformed church can ever possibly give access to those things. So to the extent that these groups want to exclude certain individuals, they can never get access to these kinds of religious fulfillment, condemning them to a lonely existence on the outside of their own personal spirituality and not actively part of a religion that they think is very important. We see, last of all, of course, that religions aren't available in all places. That essentially that you require a large amount of institutional capital or experience or even just land and people in order to be able to start a new kind of religion. But we think that on balance here, that it's much worse to take someone who has no ability to get into religion and have no other alternatives in front of them and prevent them from getting into religion than to ask a few bigots inside a church to sit next to a gay person. Because we think that is a small infringement on those individuals, but we think that it is a huge infringement to cast somebody out for those from that religion. No, thank you. We think that the next point that we heard was about treatment of people in the church, and we think that maybe homosexuals might be treated a little bit badly inside the church, but that's okay because we give them the option of staying. We give them the option of choosing whether they suffer that harm or not. You guys don't. You just merely condemn them to a personal hell. The last point we heard here was there's apparently going to be a massive attack on religion. We told you, first of all, that religion changes massively over time, that the attitude towards contraception have changed. I no longer have to go out myself and kill my sister's rapist by hand. I have a state institution who puts them away for a long amount of time. I no longer have to be careful about planting crops side by side of different types. We think religion fundamentally changes over a long amount of time. We think this is a really good way to change religion, right? And one of the reasons that is that because it allows members inside that religion, more liberal-minded people, to blame the state and as a result throw a bone to the people in that religion who need some particular help. Why is that? So they can say, well, the state's making me do this, so I might as well be nice to them. It gives them engagement, it gives them connection. It allows us to dispel the stereotypes inside of those religious organisations and show us why we think, in fact, it's actually better to have those people inside. It also allows bigots and people who are narrow-minded inside of religions to be talked to by someone who is a fan of that religion, who fundamentally adheres to most of the tenets of that religion, who lives their life in mostly a Christian or Muslim or Jewish way. And that is a way better way for those people to come around and understand those different values, as opposed to being shouted at from the outside by people who don't share those values and seem to be an enemy of those particular religions. The last point we hear is apparently about people like to have control. We think that people still do have control. How are they going to dominate these kinds of religions? But in fact, that in the face of gay people, when they manage to overcome that and still be bigoted, they're going to say, look, we were still bigoted and we still have control of our horrible religion, even though, this gay person was here and tried their best to convince us. We think absolutely that these kinds of organisations are still going to have the kind of control that they want and feel absolutely empowered to have a good religion. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that the state asks religious organisations the opportunity for people to have freedom of religion, and we think we'd ask them not to cause people interminable suffering because they are unable to reach the gates of heaven. We're very proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the previous speaker and call upon the whip from the opposition side.
Madam Speaker, the members of the closing government were right in saying that religions are placed in a unique position in society from which they derive significant benefits. Do you want to know how religious organisations are paying back the state for that? By offering a coherent doctrine by which individuals can abide by and live their lives by. That's what they offer, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, and that's what that side of the House has ignored. Because if we accept their analysis that we should allow religious organisations to, at whim, infringe some of their fundamental tenets of belief, then you are undermining the coherency of doctrine that gives individuals access to salvation, that gives individuals access to stability and security, which necessarily improves the quality of lives for every single member of that religion who exists within those communities. That's the material we brought to you at Extension, which received insufficient response from that side of the House. Let's talk about two key questions at the end of this debate. The first thing I want to ask is, what is the duty that exists upon religious organisations? The second thing I want to ask is, can we mitigate against the harms against individuals? So first, let's deal with the extension we got from closing government. Because what we first heard is that religious organisations are put in a privileged positions in comparison to other institutions. I told you in my introduction that's because they offer huge amounts of benefits for individuals who choose to ascribe to the strict beliefs that are engendered by those particular religious organisations. Your side of the house ruins the code of ethics that allows individuals stability and salvation in their lives, and that's why we think it was unacceptable to support that side of the house in this debate. But secondly, let's actually talk about what else religious institutions do in a more practical way, because they do engage in things like charities, they do engage in lots of NGOs and other institutions that enable all of those benefits that that side of the house wanted to talk about to be actually actualised. Well, what's the problem in this debate? You allow for those things to be removed and incentives for those procedures to be removed because of the imposition of the state in criticising some of their fundamental core tenets and the coherency of their doctrine, right? That's the problem that exists under their side of the house. But secondly, what else did they say? They said, the problem in this debate is that you necessarily need to create an environment where individuals feel okay to practice their beliefs. That's the environment that you guys are ruining for the majority of individuals who live in these religious communities. That's the environment that you are sacrificing for the benefit of an individual who, as we're happy to concede, chose beforehand to not abide by those code of ethics, right? For all of their fear-mongering about how individuals didn't choose to be gay, individuals can make an assessment as to whether or not they prioritise their sexuality or they prioritise salvation. We think that's a legitimate choice for religious individuals to make, and they've never told us that by the existence of pain necessarily vitiates any assessment of what you prioritise in your life and the choices that you make in your life. That's what we think we need to understand on this side of the house. So we absolutely think that individuals have a capacity to rationally assess what it is they prioritise in their existence and what it is that will actually lead to their quality of life being enhanced. That's the material we brought you a closing opposition. Go.
You assume that it is a core tenet of religion to not be homosexual. You ignore the fact that religions change over time and that elites within your religion, not the majority of lay people, decided that in the first place.
Okay, two responses to that. One, we don't really mind if it's not a core tenet of a particular religion. We think the religions have the ability to construct their own identity and what it means to actually belong to that religion. So that is absolutely fine for not being homosexual to actually belong to that particular religion. But secondly, if your concern is progressivism, you don't allow any shift by controlling the narrative that these religions are forced to perpetuate to members of their congregation, right? Because the problem under your side of the house is that religions feel as if they're under the threat by the state because they don't get to decide the code of ethics by which individuals subscribe to, because they don't get control of the narrative that's actually presented to that congregation. That's the material we brought to you in extension, which receives insufficient attention from that side of the house. If your end game is progressivism, which we don't necessarily think is legitimate, but even if it is, you don't get that under your side of the house. Any progress that has been made to religious institutions over the past 50 years has been made in a context in which religious institutions have not felt threatened by outside influences trying to dictate the way in which their narrative is manifest to their congregation and the way in which individuals live within those communities. Your side of the house puts religious institutions in antithetical as opposed to the state, and we think that that creates a culture of fear between those two institutions, which doesn't allow for any of those narratives that you want to perpetuate to actually exist within practice. That's the problem with your side of the house. But lastly, what else do they tell us under this? So secondly, let's talk about the arguments about harms, and this is the bulk of the material we got from the opening, because what they said is an individual is harmed when they don't have the capacity to continue to live within these religious communities. We accept that some individuals are harmed under the status quo. This is about a balance of rights between coherency of doctrine and creating a doctrine which every single individual abides by, which offers individuals an ability to actually self-identify with, versus an individual who has already made an rational assessment whether to opt out of that particular religion. This is about a balance of harms in this debate, and we're happy to prioritise the needs and interests of individuals who live within those religious institutions, who want access to salvation, who feel aggrieved by seeing that code of conduct being, at whim, infringed by that side of the house, by particular individuals. That's why we're happy to support that. But lastly, what they said under this particular model was, but the problem here is that these individuals have nowhere to go elsewhere. Again, we think that this debate is about creating stability within religious institutions, because that's the material they've ignored. You create a culture of security and stability when you offer religious institutions the ability to dictate how their lives actually affect every other member of that congregation. That's stability is lost, and all of the benefits to every member of that religious institution is lost under your side of the House. That's what we brought to you in extension, which received insufficient attention from that side of the House. But lastly, what we heard under this point was that some individuals will already be born and brought up in these particular institutions. We don't know why those individuals are then in a position where they are unable to rationally assess whether or not to leave that institution. Even if they go to a reformed church, which might necessarily serve their interests better, we still think they have the capacity to assess and prioritise their own interests against the interests of that particular religious institution that they are forsaking by making an active decision to come out as gay, by making an active decision to get an abortion, notwithstanding the fact that it is fundamentally in opposition to the tenets of that religion. That's what we think is crucial in this debate, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the closing opposition's case, please take away 3 things. The first thing to take away is that individuals have a right to exist within a religious institution that is stable, and the stability of that religious institution relies upon them being able to dictate a narrative in which they have the capacity to decide who is a member of that congregation and who is not. The reason why that's important is because of any of the benefits that you want to derive from religious institutions in society relies upon that coherency of doctrine and doesn't rely on individuals being able to infringe it at their own accord. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that ends it. The open final, please, of a last round of applause for our teams. Otago A, Sydney B, Auckland A, and Monash.